The world watches as the conflict in Ukraine continues, a stark and painful reality on the European continent. As of today, June 8, 2025, diplomatic efforts have yet to secure a lasting peace, and the human cost mounts with each passing day. It is a moment that calls not for despair, but for creative and determined solutions. We must look for new strategies, new ways of thinking that can change the calculus of the conflict and open a genuine path to negotiations. The search for these solutions often leads us to examine the past, to find lessons in history that can illuminate our way forward. We have tools at our disposal that, when used with precision and unity, can exert powerful influence without firing a single shot. This is where the concept of economic pressure becomes so critical. It is about strategically limiting a nation's ability to finance its aggression. When a country's war machine is fueled by revenue from its natural resources, targeting that income stream is a direct and impactful course of action. This isn't a theoretical idea. It is a tested strategy with a track record of success. By carefully restricting access to the global financial system and international markets, a coalition of nations can create a powerful incentive for a hostile government to change its behavior. The goal is not to punish a population, but to persuade its leaders that the cost of conflict is simply too high to bear. We have seen this strategy work effectively before. A decade ago, the international community faced a different challenge: Iran's advancing nuclear program. Through a combination of bold legislative action and careful diplomatic coordination, the United States and its allies implemented a sanctions regime that fundamentally altered Iran's economic landscape. This pressure was not random or unfocused. It was specifically designed to target the core of the Iranian economy, its oil exports. This historical example provides more than just inspiration. It offers a practical blueprint, a step-by-step guide on how coordinated economic action can achieve major foreign policy goals and bring a reluctant nation to the negotiating table. Therefore, as we confront the ongoing war in Ukraine, it is essential that we consider this proven path. The principles that guided the Iran strategy, unity, targeted pressure, and a clear objective, are entirely relevant to the current crisis. The challenge is to adapt and apply these lessons to the specific circumstances of Russia's war economy. It requires a clear-eyed assessment of what has worked, what hasn't, and a renewed commitment from Western allies to act in concert. By understanding and wielding the power of economic statecraft, we can offer more than just hope. We can offer a concrete plan to help bring peace to Ukraine. The story of the Iran sanctions is a masterclass in effective policymaking, demonstrating how different branches of government can work together to achieve a common goal. It began when initial diplomatic outreach by the Obama administration failed to halt Iran's nuclear ambitions. In response, the United States Congress stepped in with decisive action. In 2010, it passed a law with powerful secondary sanctions, which penalized foreign banks that did business with Iran. This was the first key step, effectively beginning to isolate Iran from the global financial system. It showed the world that the United States was serious about using its economic leverage to address the growing nuclear threat. The real turning point, however, came in 2011. Against the initial wishes of the administration, which feared a spike in global oil prices, Congress pushed for even tougher measures. A bipartisan amendment, which passed the Senate with a stunning 100-0 vote, targeted Iran's most vital economic artery, its central bank, and its oil sales. A crucial compromise was reached. The law allowed the president to grant waivers to countries if they could show they were significantly reducing their purchases of Iranian oil every 6 months. This clever design created a powerful incentive for cooperation, making it easier for Iran's customers to comply than to defy the sanctions. The economic impact on Iran was swift and severe. Over the next year and a half, the country's oil exports plummeted by an astonishing 60%, falling from over 2.5 million barrels per day to just 1 million. This massive loss of revenue occurred without causing the global energy crisis that many had feared, partly thanks to rising oil production elsewhere. But Congress was not finished. It then advanced a policy that required any remaining payments for Iranian oil to be held in special accounts in the purchasing country. This meant Iran could not access the money as hard currency. It could only use the funds to buy humanitarian goods or other non-sanctioned items from that specific country. This sustained and escalating pressure campaign effectively starved the Iranian regime of the cash it needed. The economic crisis it created was a key factor in the 2013 election, of the more moderate Hassan Rouhani, who campaigned on a promise to end Iran's isolation. His victory paved the way for the negotiations that ultimately led to the 2015 Iran nuclear deal. This entire episode illustrates a vital lesson. When the White House and Congress work together, even in a good cop, bad cop dynamic, they can forge a sanctions policy that is both powerful and flexible, creating the necessary leverage to bring about historic diplomatic breakthroughs. In the years since the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, the West has imposed numerous sanctions on Russia. Yet, the war continues, funded in large part by a steady stream of revenue from Russia's vast energy exports. While existing sanctions have caused disruption, they have not delivered the decisive economic blow that many had hoped for. A critical weakness has been the approach to Russia's oil and gas sector. Early on, policymakers were cautious, fearing that aggressive energy sanctions would shock the global market and harm their own economies. This allowed Russia to continue selling its most valuable commodity and earning the hard currency it needs to pay for soldiers, tanks, and missiles. A major attempt to address this was the price cap of $60 per barrel on Russian oil, introduced by the G7 nations in late 2022. The idea was to limit Russia's profits while keeping its oil on the market to ensure stable global supplies. However, this policy has been largely ineffective. The main reason for its failure is the lack of a strong enforcement mechanism, specifically the threat of secondary sanctions. Without the risk of being penalized themselves, buyers and shippers found ways around the cap. Russia adapted quickly, using a shadow fleet of aging tankers and relying on non-Western insurance to sell its oil at prices well above the cap, keeping its war chest full. The contrast with the Iran strategy is stark. The very tools that proved so successful in curbing Iran's ambitions have not yet been fully deployed against Russia. Major Russian energy giants, the engines of the country's economy, are still not subject to the same kind of powerful secondary sanctions that isolated Iranian banks. This has created a loophole that Moscow has expertly exploited. As a result, Russia's economy has proven more resilient than expected, allowing the Kremlin to sustain a long and costly war of aggression against its neighbor. It is a clear sign that our current economic strategy is incomplete and requires a significant adjustment. This is the unfinished business that policymakers in Washington and European capitals must now confront. To truly impact Russia's ability to wage war, the strategy must evolve. It is not enough to sanction individuals and secondary industries while leaving the main source of revenue largely intact. The lesson from the past is clear. Targeting a nation's core economic lifeline is the most effective way to apply meaningful pressure. The challenge now is to build the political will and international consensus to apply this lesson to Russia, closing the loopholes that have allowed its oil money to continue flowing. The path forward is clear, grounded in the successful strategy of the past. To help bring a just end to the war in Ukraine, the United States and its allies should adopt an oil sanctions regime against Russia, modeled directly on the one that worked against Iran. This would involve imposing secondary sanctions on the international banks and entities that facilitate Russia's oil sales. Waivers could be offered to countries like India and China, but only on the condition that they steadily and significantly reduce their volume of Russian oil purchases. This approach is both tough and pragmatic, creating a powerful incentive for compliance while preventing a sudden shock to the global energy market. Furthermore, we should reintroduce the escrow account system. Under this rule, any payments made for the reduced amount of Russian oil would be locked in an account in the buyer's country. Russia would not be able to access this money as cash to fund its military. Instead, it could only use the funds to purchase humanitarian supplies or other approved goods from that nation. This would directly choke off the flow of hard currency to the Kremlin, striking at the financial heart of its war machine. With global oil supplies currently outpacing demand, experts believe that a 20 to 40% reduction in Russia's exports is achievable within a year without causing a major price increase. For this strategy to succeed, unity between the White House and Congress is paramount, just as it was in the case of Iran. Congress is already showing its readiness to act, with a bipartisan bill gaining overwhelming support for tougher measures. The administration should work with these lawmakers to refine the legislation, ensuring it is smart, targeted, and effective. At the same time, Europe has a vital leadership role to play. By moving first to seize the more than $200 billion in frozen Russian government assets and using those funds to support Ukraine, Europe can create powerful momentum and encourage Washington to follow suit with robust oil sanctions. This is a moment for bold and coordinated action. The people of Ukraine continue to fight for their freedom, and they need our unwavering and effective support. We have a proven toolkit of economic measures that can seriously diminish Russia's ability to sustain its aggression. By combining the legislative power of the United States Congress, the diplomatic leadership of the White House, and the unified resolve of European allies, we can implement a smart sanctions strategy that pressures Moscow toward a genuine peace. Through teamwork, careful planning, and shared determination, we can help write a new chapter, one of peace and sovereignty for Ukraine.